Welcome to the Mile High Church podcast. This is Josh Reeves. I'm so glad you're listening. Hey, Zamira Jezworska, Jackie Harris, and I are facilitating a meditation and prayer retreat in September. Spend a few days with awesome people, meditating, praying, enjoying life, just being. Sometimes in this wacky world, we just need to find an oasis and a sanctuary to get back to ourselves, and then we can return to that wackiness, not so wacky ourselves, and find some thread of sanity. And we'll have a great time. Learn more at milehighchurch.org.
So I talked to you at the welcoming about Memorial Day, and as I kind of pondered this whole topic of spiritual freedom, what we're really celebrating during this time of year is our personal freedoms that we have. You know, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, the Constitution, what it tells us we have, what freedoms we have in this country. And I remember in the 7th grade, and it's interesting how as you're preparing a talk or a class, for me anyway, things will pop up into my mind. And so I thought about it. I was in the 7th grade, and I'm from the East Coast, if you don't know that, and a little south, if you hear a little of that. But what we did was, in the 7th grade, we had to memorize the Gettysburg Address. And then we took a field trip to Gettysburg. And now I want to say that Gettysburg and the Gettysburg Address actually was written and spoken by Abraham Lincoln in 1863, before the Civil War was over. And it was to commemorate the opening of the Gettysburg National Cemetery. So being there is a profound experience if you've ever been to Gettysburg. And so as a 7th grader, this group of 7th grade kids there at the battleground saying the Gettysburg Address still comes back to me. I remember most of it, but I'm not going to quote it for you now. However, I did have a few people after the 8 come through the line and read and say a few lines just to help me remember. So it's, you know, this is such a powerful thing for us to remember the sacrifices that were made so that we can live in a free country. But the talk today is really going to be on spiritual freedom, which I think the readings have done, the music has done, to remind us spiritual freedom looks different, and we are in control of spiritual freedom. Oftentimes there are outside forces that are responsible for our personal freedoms. I also want to mention natural freedoms. Ernest will talk about natural freedom when he talks about spiritual freedom, but I see natural freedom as the freedom you see if you watch birds flying, or if you watch the deer and the elk, which people love to come to me because I live in the foothills and say, "Isn't it wonderful?" It is wonderful, and then they eat all your plants and your... My husband used to say that they stood in the woods and said, "Oh, let's see what's at the Harris Deli today." But I love to see them. They're majestic animals. So natural freedom for them is, and for the ducks that swim in a pond, that natural freedom is the freedom they recognize they have because of their instinct. They feel safe. Animals also know when they're not safe. And so they respond also against that feeling that they have when they think they're not safe. But remember, it's their instincts, and we aren't driven by instincts. You may think you are because of habit, but animals are really moving from instinct. And it's a reaction to a stimulus. So something has happened and they have a response. Spiritual freedom looks a lot different. And our friend, Ralph Waldo Emerson, talked about the whole notion of spiritual freedom in his writing of the Self-Reliance. And that was one of his works. And I want to just share with you what he had to say. He says he valued the idea that every person has an innate wisdom within them, a connection to a greater universal truth that can guide their life. He emphasized the importance of trusting oneself and listening to the voice of intuition. By doing so, individuals could remain true to their unique identity and purpose, rather than being shaped by societal expectations or external authority. Emerson viewed spiritual freedom as a fundamental part of being authentic and living a meaningful life. His perspective encouraged people to think freely, question traditional norms, and align their actions with their personal values and beliefs. Through spiritual freedom, he believed people could achieve a deeper connection to themselves and to the world around them. That's what spiritual freedom is all about. Now, he would have called it spiritual independence. It's the same idea. So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about generically what we talk about as spiritual freedom. Then I'm going to talk to you about what Science of Mind teaches about spiritual freedom. And then we'll look at what you can do to try to increase your ability to embrace that spiritual freedom for yourself. So first thing is this, and I think in one of the readings spoke to this: you've got to liberate yourself from your limitations. Anybody in here have no limitations? Okay. I think we would not be honest with ourselves if we put our hand up and says, yeah, I have no limitations, and then you walk out the door and you go, oh, except for this one and this one. So you know what that means. You just want to overcome those limitations. So you've got to do some work. That's why we're going to look at practices to overcome those limitations, or at least to minimize them. You know, don't think you've got to chop them all off right away, but you need to do some practice to minimize. The next is you've got to be authentic. And authenticity is about your true nature, and that's looking at your values and your beliefs. Your values and your beliefs. It's one of the things I love about teaching classes, because in your credentialed classes, and credentialed classes are the ones people need if they're going to go up the practitioner path, but anybody can take these classes, you get to look at yourself. Now, maybe that's why some people don't take those classes, because it's hard. It's not easy to look at yourself, because you get in your own way. But what you've got to learn to do is understand, to be authentic, you have to look at your values, your beliefs. What do I think my purpose is in life? So I encourage you, this is plug for classes. Please consider if you haven't taken a class. We do both online and in-person classes, so something will work for everyone. You've also got to have inner peace. And to me, inner peace is finding that ability, and this is where you've got to let go of all that stuff that's outside of yourself. You know, the world is bombarding us with things to make us not feel safe, not feel inner peace, and there's only one person that can stop that. And it's you. Turn off the TV. Don't spend so much time on social media. Whatever it is that triggers you, and I'm not saying, I'm one that will watch news because it gives me great prayer work. But don't get hung up in it. Don't all of a sudden take it on, and now you're angry and you have all these feelings, these negative feelings. You've got to have inner peace in order to have any kind of ability to have spiritual freedom. And it's about love. Now, that may sound strange, but spiritual freedom is about love. Bell Hooks talked about the need for a powerful discourse on love to enhance freedom for all. And love comes from a connection to something greater. And that's the last point in this section, is that something greater. We know there is a power in the universe greater, and we can use it. I can use it. You can use it. There is a power, no matter what you choose to call it. If it's uncomfortable to call it God, find a word that works for you. But there is a power, folks, in the universe greater than any one of us is. And we need to learn how to use that power. Take a deep breath. The next thing we're going to look at is, what does science of mind have to say about this? And these are words and thoughts of our founder, Ernest Holmes. So I have a quote from Ernest that I'm going to share with you. And this quote comes from the first page of the Science of Mind textbook, even though it's page 25. It's the first read, because you know how books are. They have all that introduction. And this is the first readable page. And it's from the section that's called The Thing Itself. The divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under law. Thus, the inherent nature of man is forever seeking to express itself in terms of freedom. We do wait to listen to this inner voice, for it tells us of a life wonderful in its scope, of a love beyond our fondest dreams, of a freedom which the soul craves. So for Ernest, freedom is a natural law. It is a natural law. It's almost like if we were really functioning on our instincts, this is what we would be looking for, freedom. Of course, we work with intuition. And I mentioned that yesterday I did a morning, one of my sacred Saturdays, and it's kind of funny because I have a lot of things that are coming up at one time here. And in the middle of it, it struck me that my whole sacred Saturday was on intuition. And my talk focuses very much on intuition. And I thought, isn't it interesting how the universe always gives you what you want? You just have to be aware of it. So I loved when I became aware of that, because all of this flows together better. The other thing that Ernest said was, we've got to remember we are working with the law of mind. Now, some people have a problem with that word law. I don't know, they think it's the police or something. But if you think about it, in science, there are scientific laws. One of them is gravity. So why should we be afraid to think of spiritual laws that guide our lives? Because God is with every single one of you. Every single one of you. God is not out there somewhere up in the sky, raining down, good or bad. God is part of who you are. That still, small voice that will direct you if you listen to it. But we're so much smarter that we tend to just run through life and then wonder why things happen the way they do. We've got to take some time. Ernest also said we needed to learn to release limiting beliefs. And we all have those. It's all part of our value system and what we actually believe. They're those negative thought patterns that actually we've practiced for years and years and years. That repetition, we've got to let them go. And it's not just a matter of saying, okay, today I'm going to stop having limiting beliefs. Wouldn't that be nice? That's too easy. So what we have to do is we've got to learn to practice. Another part of this spiritual freedom is forgiveness. Forgiveness. You know, that's a tough thing for many people. But if we do not learn to forgive ourselves, forgive others, we continue to live in the past. You cannot have spiritual freedom if you're going to live in the past. So I encourage you to find a way to practice forgiveness, especially for yourself. And even though someone may have done something to you that you think is unforgivable, forgive them so that you can live a better life, a more prosperous life. The only one that's hurt in that situation, what is it? It's the thing about drinking poison and thinking the other person is going to die from it. That's a quote that's used often because that's what we act like. So let's practice some forgiveness. He talks about imprisoned splendor. Just sit there with that for a moment. Ernest believed that we all possess an imprisoned splendor within ourselves. It's a divine spark. When I first started coming to Mile High, I'm thinking it was probably 2007, I was sitting, at that time we were over in the vote, and I was sitting there and Roger did a message and it was on the divine spark within. And that has always stayed with me because that is your imprisoned splendor, that divine spark. How do you like knowing that that divine spark is right there, ready to work for you? Does it make you nervous? I'm not doing it right. Remember, God is driving. Let God be the pilot of your life instead of you trying to work around it somehow. Now, freedom, he says, is not license. So once you've established and created and feel that spiritual freedom within you, it doesn't mean that you can now go out and tell everybody how very spiritual you are. He says, our choices have consequences, and none of us is ever completely independent of the collective consciousness. Now, those of you that have taken classes know what that is. You've all got pieces of the collective consciousness. Family. Your values and your beliefs started somewhere. You didn't pop out of the womb having a certain set of values and beliefs. Where do you think they came from? The culture, the family. So understand that that collective culture, it doesn't mean you can't deal with it. It means be aware of it. That you do your work, but be aware that beyond yourself is this whole notion of collective consciousness. If you want to know more about that, take classes. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. So those were the thoughts that Science of Mind have about this whole idea of spiritual freedom. That idea that we really are in control of whether or not we live a spiritually free life. It's nobody else. Nobody else. Now we can say, oh, but, this happened to me when I was young, or, this is what I'm seeing on the news. And you have control of yourself, folks. But you've got to do your work. And so that's the last part of the talk is how can you practice? How can you practice? I am a firm believer in contemplation and meditation, and people go, oh, I can't sit still that long. My mind goes. One of the things I personally love about contemplation is it moves you from here to here. And so you can sit and you can be with God, and you can have a conversation with God. Don't be afraid of meditation. Don't be afraid of it. Some people might take a reading and use that as kind of an impetus for their meditation or their contemplation, but I encourage you, do something to sit still and in the quiet. Then after you've sat there, or even think of it this way maybe instead, use self-reflection and introspection. So you've sat and things have come up, and now think about, what does that mean in my life? What is that all about? And then, and these are in no specific order, by the way, because this next one I probably would have put at the top of the list if I was doing order, and that is cultivate compassion, gratitude, and forgiveness. Cultivate compassion, gratitude, and forgiveness. That can be part of your spiritual practice. You can, just being in your everyday life, you can show compassion, like in traffic, or at the grocery store when the line is long or somebody's taking a long time and all that. Practice compassion. And of course, gratitude. Some people do a gratitude journal at the end of their day, and they write down all the things that happened to them in that day that they are grateful for. And they sit with that. And that can be a meditation in itself. And again, I say forgiveness. Work on forgiving. Forgiving, forgiving, forgiving. It doesn't mean you forget. It means that you want a better life for yourself. That's what you're forgiving for yourself. The next one is a fun one, and we did this yesterday. We did something different yesterday. I usually have 3 practices that we do in the Sacred Saturdays, and they're usually contemplative, or I'll do a meditation, but I changed it up on them a little bit yesterday, and we did something called the Notice Everything game. And so one of the things I'm suggesting is get out in nature. Get out in nature. Nature's the greatest teacher. I mean, those of you that are gardeners, I'm sure you love getting in that dirt and planting your seeds and planting your plants, but get out into nature and then notice everything. So what was interesting was people came back. I sent them out for 20 minutes, and they were all over campus. We have a pond back here in the back. If you're not aware, they went to the pond and saw the fowl that are on the pond. They went over here to CCU, and there's some beautiful purple flowers over here, and one of them came back and said, I couldn't believe it. I walked over to those flowers. There were bees all over the flowers. Now that may seem, well, of course there were, but they noticed it, whereas they might have walked right by them and not noticed at all. Notice everything. Try that. Even walking in the grocery store. I mean, it doesn't have to just be in nature. Start noticing everything, because that is when you're really allowing your intuition to speak to you. When you see with your eyes, then you see with your soul too. And this will be a surprise for everyone. Take classes. I say that, but I will tell you, I remember being in Beyond Limits. That first, I had come here in 2006, and then I started classes that January, and it was mind-blowing. Beyond Limits, from where I'd come from, and I came from a religious background, but it just opened up. It opened up my mind. It opened up my soul, and so I just encourage you, because as Josh said in the messages, the announcements, we do have classes this summer that you can consider taking. One of them is Essential Ernest Holmes, put a plug in for my class. And if you don't know much about Ernest Holmes, this is a great class to learn about Ernest Holmes and the teachings of science of mind. And it really, it's not as heavy as the name might suggest. So to kind of wrap up, spiritual freedom is really an inside job for each one of us. It's finding and responding to that intuitive voice that's always, always talking to us. It's not like the little guys that you used to see sitting on the shoulder, you know, the devil and the angel, and they, you know, it's right there. God has never left you because God is always right here, waiting for you to listen, to respond. And so I hope that that's something you can take with you in this Memorial Day weekend, that spiritual freedom is about taking care of you, taking care of that intuitive piece of you that wants to take you to great places if you just trust it. Frederick Buechner, a Christian theologian, said this: "Your life and my life flow into each other as waves, just like waves flow into other waves. And unless there is peace and joy and freedom for you, there can be no real peace or joy or freedom for me." That's what the essence of spiritual freedom is. So instead of doing an affirmative prayer, I've invited one of my students from Advanced Consciousness Studies to read her final project in the class. Each term, the students are asked to create a project, and they don't have to be giant. You should see this one that we have that's just stupendous. But I've asked Lisa to be here to share her final project, and the final projects were, what did you really learn in this class?
Thank you, Reverend Jackie. And my path to freedom has included many Mile High classes, which is still, my path to freedom is very much still ongoing. Most recently, I've taken Advanced Consciousness Studies, been blessed by that class, and it's really helped reveal that divine spark inside of me. And over the course of the months of taking this class with many wonderful classmates, this poem evolved, so I will share it. I am soul, so bright, so free, a light of oneness in eternity. The stars, the sky, the whispered air, all the world tells me spirit is here. With every step, with every breath, I dance beyond the fear of death. For spiritual beings never fade. In love's embrace, eternal life is graced. The creative process flows through me. A dream so bold, my heart grows of thee. I shape the world with thoughts divine, a spark of heaven, creation's grand design. No chains can find, no walls can stand when freedom's placed within my hand. For life is vast and love is wide, and spirit is always by my side. The triune nature cannot stray as spirit's light guides my way. The spiritual laws in me align as faith transforms both space and time. And when I gaze upon the night, I know I am love. I know I am light. No need to seek, no need to roam, for heaven is here, and I am its home. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mile High Church podcast. This podcast is made possible by the generous contributions from listeners like you. To make a donation, please visit milehighchurch.org.